And welcome back to the Oopa Loopa Cafe here on the 14th of January 2013. One of the stories in this segment is kind of interesting. It's actually from Italy through the UK. We get it from telegraph.co.uk. And it is about the Colosseum in Rome. It seems that a restoration project has been underway there for some time. It's actually been tied up with a lot of bureaucracy and alternative opinions expressed towards the effort. However, it is a privately funded effort on an incredibly important and ancient site, the Roman Coliseum. And the story comes to us from Nick Squires in Rome, and it's dated the 10th of January. Restorers let's start over. Roman-era graffiti found on the Colosseum. Graffiti dating from the Roman era has been found scrawled on the walls of the Colosseum during restoration work. Restorers also discovered fragments of brightly colored frescoes suggesting that the ancient monument was gaudily decorated when it hosted gladiatorial fights and wild animal hunts under the emperors. The fragments in ochre, red, blue, and green are in stark contrast to the monochrome gray and white of the travertine marble that covers the facade of the amphitheater today. The graffiti includes hard-to-decipher words and symbols, as well as two large phalluses, possibly an erotic representation, or perhaps just lewd scribbling. The new discoveries were made on the third and highest level of the Colosseum, which is closed to the public. They are spread out over a 200-foot-long section of a covered tunnel which would have funneled spectators to their seats high above the arena. The colored frescoes were an extraordinary discovery, said Rosella Ria, who is in charge of the landmark in the center of Rome. We weren't expecting to find them. There is still a great deal to be studied, and there will almost certainly be other surprises, she said. The frescoes would have been rich and elaborate in color and detail, said Ida Somonelli, the head of the restoration team. Now, this is a £22 million, British pound, restoration of the Colosseum, which I can't do the math in my head, but I think it's probably close to $40 million. It's being done under a 15-year contract. It provides for the construction of a tourist service center outside the monument, while the third phase includes restoration of the internal area and more comprehensive restoration of the underground cells, or hypogeum, beneath the arena. This is not only an interest of Rome and Italy, but this is a symbol of how Rome represents itself to the world, said Mr. Ornaghi. Under the contract, Todd's has the rights to use the Colosseum logo for 15 years and to put its own brand on tickets bought by the 6 million tourists who pay to see the monument each year. Mr. Della Valle on Tuesday insisted that it had no intention of covering the exterior of the monument with large advertising hoardings, and said that the funding was essential to protect Italy's cultural assets in the future. I'm under the impression that we better utilize the beauty that we have, the quality of life, and the government network. We will have a better chance for development and employment. Mario Saria Barbera, Rome's superintendent of archaeology, said a potential new legal challenge to the project by the consumer organization Codicons would have no legal grounds and would not delay the project. Codicons has questioned the legitimacy of the private sponsorship deal and what it calls a lack of transparency in the bidding process. In early July, a Rome regional court deemed the consumer group's legal claim inadmissible, and last week Italy's Authority for Public Works tenders appeared to remove the last legal hurdle to progressing with the project. Now, let's get back to the nature of the graffiti and what was said about big advertising signs on the outside of the Colosseum. Well, advertising is what I think is actually depicted with these enigmatic drawings, words, whatever. And it is probably an advertisement for a very local house of prostitution. Now, this is not just an off-the-wall guess. It is actually connected to similar advertisements in Pompeii and Herculaneum that were buried and preserved by the volcanic eruption in 72 AD. So we know that the high dollar resort town of Pompeii and its accompanying town of Herculaneum were engaged in these types of entertainments. Well, the Colosseum was all about entertainment. So, and pretty much only the rich people went to the Colosseum because the rest just couldn't afford it. So these rich people, almost all men, were going to the Colosseum, and on their way to the high dollar nosebleed seats on the third rung, they would have been exposed to these advertisements. So some things never change, I guess. It's just a matter of degree. When you go to Las Vegas today, they don't really have ads on the walls, but they certainly have handouts, flyers, etc. that are given to anyone passing, pretty much. At any rate, that's what I think was happening in the decadence of ancient Rome. So we have a couple other clips coming up, a couple of other stories coming up. The clip that's coming up almost immediately is from our Temerity Magazine folks, and I think you'll enjoy it. Actually, this one you've already enjoyed once, but we'll be back right after this one.
Hi, this is Chad Everson, and I'd like to welcome you to Temerity Magazine.
Last bottle I pulled out in the corner here, liquid opal dock. It's pontled scarred, rolled lip. It's a common pontled medicine, I would say mid-1850s, hand blown, got the pontled scar. It's pretty neat. Graham can get a good shot of that. Maybe.
Well, that's quite exciting. You seem to have a pretty good luck when I follow you to do these digs. You're always finding something.
Yeah, something, sometimes we'll dig these. The honey dippers didn't clean them out, and we'll actually get 50 to 100 bottles.
Did you want to share how you find these holes?
I use a...
I see you've got a probe there.
Yeah,
are you going to share the secret?
A T-handle probe. I just push it in the ground and feel for differences in the soil, and you can feel if you hit glass or a brick.
It will screech or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I've tried this with you, and you've obviously got a real skill like a water diviner, because I had very little luck finding anything myself with that. Obviously, years of practice.
Years of practice and thinking you have a hole and you dig it and it's not one. You learn real quick what an outhouse feels like when you probe it. They all probe different, but you get a general idea.
It seems to me that you're searching more for the feel of the soil more than the screech of the glass.
Yeah, they threw a lot of wood ash in from the old fire pits. And the ash has a certain feel to it opposed to like this is sand here. Ash feels different than sand, and you can actually hear it through the handle. So.
Now, if they had these privies cleaned out, why did they throw bottles and stuff into it?
Well, it was a convenient trash pit. Back in the mid-1800s, if you didn't want to load up the horse and wagon and take your trash to the dump on the other side of town, just throw it in the outhouse. You can get rid of it. And people back then, I don't think they liked a lot of glass laying around. If they broke it, they got cut. There wasn't antibiotics back then. It was a real danger to them. So,
Now, would they have had an outhouse here, like a wooden box, or would they just have a hole that they came from the house back here
well,
with their chamber pots, and then they came and they dumped it in the pit here?
yeah, they did a lot of that. They used the chamber pots at nights, and I think they would come out here during the day. In the actual construction of this pit, this would have been lined with wood walls back in the day, but it's since deteriorated. When I was digging, I could see traces of the old wood planks.
Get a little grizzly.
And once again, thanks to Chad Everson and everybody at Temerity Magazine for making that portion of this show such an important and entertaining one. Coming up in the next segment, we have a little bit more information about Pompeii and some of the writings that were found on the walls there. Herculaneum is where they found all of the body artwork, etc., and pretty much all of the houses of prostitution, although it's more like a stall of prostitution in most cases in in Herculaneum. In Pompeii, however, it was, as I said, the resort area. So, boy, they had it going, I guess. If you were rich and Roman, you really had it going. Also, later in this program, we have a story about some folks who are on their way to Burma to try to recover some World War II era fighter planes that apparently were buried there or stashed there, might be the more accurate description. At any rate, this is the Oopa Loopa Cafe for the 14th of January 2013. I'm glad you chose to spend part of your lunchtime with us. Stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Ta-da!